Well, good evening here. We will get started. So we will call to order going from my left to right, those who are here first.
Robert Jones.
James King.
Jenny Sisson, and then those who are online, if you want to say your name.
Rob Williams.
And then we have Rob Williams and maybe Kyle in a bit or not. So I'll try. Well, with that, we do have a forum that is present tonight, so we can proceed. And we will do the approval of last month's meeting minutes. So if everyone, I don't know if you read it prior to coming in or not.
I did.
If I could get a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So our
Rob.
previous minutes, oh, sorry, Rob, I forgot you're out there. Do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so there's four of us that say aye, everyone who's present. Thank you. We will move on then to, we have no old business, so we will move on to our new business and I will turn it over to our staff.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, we actually have three petitions this evening. We have two conditional use requests, and then we have a variance from developmental standards. So it's been a bit since we've had three all in one evening, so first, starting out with the first petition that we have before you tonight, this is a petition that was filed by Kevin and Kim Bucklew. This is regarding and pertaining to property at 8604 South State Road 67. Mr. Bucklew is present with us this evening here. All the filing and notice requirements have been fulfilled for this filing, as well as we have not received any opposition or any feedback of any kind from the public. Nothing has been received by the planning department. So just starting out, we have some current use and site details that we would like to provide the board. This property is zoned rural residential district. It's the RR district. This property is actually almost 11 acres at 10.81 acres. This property was originally zoned planned business until the 2021 map zoning map update that we had conducted here a couple years ago. When this property was purchased by the Bucklews, it was purchased in 2016. And when it was purchased, it was actually purchased with the intentions to develop it as a greenhouse, plant nursery operation. They had a business in Noblesville at one time. And so they intended to provide that same service to our community here in Pendleton on this property. That use in the planned business district was a permitted use. That being said, with the change to rural residential at the time with that zoning map change, because at that time that property wasn't being used as a commercial use. So it reverted back to a rural residential, just a residential property. But that being said, though, the land is currently used as residential dwelling in the rear. It's on the south border of the parcel. And then at the north end, for the last two seasons, it's been used as a temporary seasonal roadside produce stand. We call it kind of a hoop house. We've got two other similar structures here with the, it's the Smith's Market there off of State Street, as well as R&R Market. So this was our third that we were able to provide the community. And in that, we have permitted that for the last 2 years as a seasonal roadside stand. The north end and the south end of that property, you'll see here in a few moments, it's separated by 3.5 acres of wooded area. A roadside stand is actually permitted in the rural residential. It did not require the conditional use. And for that roadside stand, it's a temporary structure which is for intended use to display or sell seasonal ag-related products. So that could be crop and or plants. So like I said, the petitioner had been doing so as a temporary basis for the last two seasons, generally from April until about October. On this property, there are two detention ponds, one at the north and one at the south ends of the property. And towards the north end of the property, there is a new detention pond, which overflows to a ditch there on the northwest end of the property. So we'll kind of illustrate it here. You'll see the drive that kind of divides the property in two with the residential property here to the south. This area right in here is where it's currently been used as a roadside stand. That you'll see that there are greenery, plants, shrubs and trees that have been for sale for the last couple of summers. But then right in this area is a detention pond that was dug just as a small detention pond, and then they hit a spring and then ended up gaining more water. And they worked with Madison County Water and Soil District and also IDEM to be able to get the permits in place. And they worked with an engineer that constructed an overflow that crosses this drive here to the northwest property, and it releases out here for any overage there for storm and rainfall. Also, this property is serviced by the town of Pendleton Electric, but it is a private well for their water supply. Stephanie, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide here. So what the petitioner is asking the board tonight is they're asking to be allowed a conditional use, to be able to expand that temporary roadside produce stand to a permanent seasonal, not just seasonal, but a year-round plant nursery greenhouse. They would like to operate the business for seasonal demand, but yet limit it to daylight hours only. They are proposing on this north east expansion, what they like to do is install, and you can see here in the green, there's 2 greenhouses here. These are the locations that they are proposing. Can't see it real well, I apologize, but this greenhouse here is 100 by 32 by 16. And then the one to the south is a 48 by 17 by 12 here. Both of those sit at least 20 feet from the property line. And then they also are proposing they would like to have a small office building. The exact material or the makeup of that structure is to be determined. They wanted to seek the conditional use before they looked into that a little bit further. But that would be limited. The space accommodates a 32 by 16 by 18. And that would sit then just west of that detention pond. Between that office space and the driveway that comes off of State Road 67 is where the parking area is for customers and clients when they come into the property. Also along this drive is a fence, and you'll see right here is the entrance gate here into the business. And that way it keeps it separated from the residential property to the south. And it channels controls all of the activities just to this most east side of the property. This here on the left side, which is the west side, that is for future development. That is to be determined as well. If they were to get approval for a conditional use, any development there would be subject to an improvement location permit with our building inspector, as well as they would be subject to our developmental standards as well. Go on to the, over here to the right, I do apologize. You can see here, this is kind of a zoomed out image of the property. This is where the plant nursery greenhouse would take place. Then here in the center is that 3.5 wooded area, and then that residential area in the rear. This is where that second detention pond sits. There's about 600 feet between the residential area and the use there for the desired use for the conditional use area for green space and plant nursery. So as far as our presentation, that is all we have except for our staff analysis. If you have any questions for myself, also petitioners here. I don't know if his wife, Kim Buckley, was going to try to connect through Zoom. I don't know if she's been able to do that or not. She has, okay.
So there's a number.
So she is here also to answer any questions that you may have before we give our staff analysis.
I mean, I just want to do a quick summary so that I know
Yeah.
I computed this. It was initially commercial.
It was initially years ago commercial. That is correct.
Which makes sense on maybe what would have been there
Yes,
little
and
bit,
being zoned
and
planned.
what's right beside it.
Yes, and so on the east, the entire east border of this property is general business properties that are along State Road, I believe it's State Road 9 if we go
Mhm.
back up there. And those properties, as well as this subject property and the adjoiner property to the west, were all zone plan business at one point. And then when that zoning map change came in 2021, then they did kind of lateral zoning change to those to the east to general business. Planned business was a more broad business use. And then we separated them out into heavy business, light industrial, heavy industrial, and general business. So then those properties to the east then had the lateral move to general business. But then those two parcels, this subject property and the property to the west, got zoned then as rural residential because there was not an active business on the site at the time.
And that's
You're
when
correct.
we just had kind of lumped.
Yes,
Again, we know that the adjoining areas could be different because we've had
yes,
another parcel in the past that
yes.
we've reviewed
Some
with
mixed
similar
uses,
things,
mhm.
yes. As far as that residential dwelling, there wasn't any thought there with the person who lives there, I mean.
So yes, I can answer. It is a resident, that is a relative of the Bucklews that lives there.
Okay.
I think she's lived there for quite some time, probably will continue to do so for a while. I don't know if there's any intentions in moving in if that
And it's their
changes. But
property.
yes, it is a family, relative. that
And then
lives there.
as far as materials or parking spaces needed, all that isn't for tonight necessarily, so that you would just make sure met the UDO.
Yes, that is correct. Being the fact that this is zoned rural residential, it doesn't have as much of those elements and requirements as a, say, even institutional or a business, commercial related, general business, heavy business that has those extra additional 3 layers of product and features and so forth, window requirements. There's window requirements for the residential property. So they don't require a lot of that site development plan detail. But yes, it would require the standards of the UDO still to be met. That all that would apply for rural residential.
Did you say, Denise, have we any comments from any adjoining property owners?
Yeah, we have not received any,
received that.
and they did notify them. Affidavit's been provided, the certificate of mailing has been provided to support the fact that they have been notified. Actually, for this property, they went one step farther and they did certified mail receipts. So,
No
and
negative feedback.
no feedback at all. That is correct.
So when this was zoned, business in 2016 and you purchased the property, when the change was gonna come about to, rural residential, was everybody notified? Did you have any, you didn't know about it yet? So,
Yeah.
No, it's just in the paper.
It's just,
I mean,
yeah.
if it's an entire jurisdiction wide,
put it in the paper. Yeah.
it's just in the paper.
Okay.
And
Yeah. And we've had a few of those here and there that
Yeah.
have come up. Yes.
It's just the way that the map kind of got drawn up to make things blend from one designation to the next, so
Yes.
it wasn't a perfect science per
Yes.
se, so some of these parcels.
Mhm.
and some of it was just the algorithm that the map system used. I
Yeah.
mean, this was something that was, I guess, identified at the time it's not being used, but other things where it's just the algorithm that was put in, what's the next closest thing in our new code, and it just assigned that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we review just to make sure it still makes sense and
Mhm.
it blends with everything surrounding it.
Yes.
As far as, is there concerns with any, like, the traffic going in, or is that, something later on when the greenhouse and the office and parking get laid out?
Yeah, the traffic is fairly minimal. I know that as the business grows, that can also grow as well. It is a pretty wide throat there at 67.
That's what I was
It-
wondering, that
yes,
cut.
yes. I would say probably 40 feet, I think, maybe 30 feet, maybe, the width of the driveway there at the edge when it hits at the opening.
There's line of sight,
Okay,
Mhm.
thousands of feet each direction. It's,
Is there a shoulder there?
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, there,
yeah.
it looks like it's,
a very
yeah,
thorough, yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
And it's about
Planning
100
process.
feet, that's in our analysis,
for-
there's about 100 feet from 67 to the entrance into the business. So it sets farther back, it gives us a good throat for any type of stacking needs or anything like that, if someone was pulling into the business there.
Do you
Nothing
guys have
further
any
from me.
other-
Rob, do you have anything?
I do not.
Thank you.
Okay, you want me to go ahead and go right into
Go
the
ahead and
analysis?
go.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
As staff, we believe the conditional use will not pose an endangerment on public health and safety. The parcels to the east, like we were talking about, utilizes that general business zoning. Properties the property offers adequate utilities to service the additional facilities, including that internal access drive and parking lot. Again, 150 feet, about 150 feet, from State Road 67, which we believe will help properly control ingress and egress to the site. They also did meet with the electric department, I believe about a year ago, to gain additional lines to service their hoop houses. So that is sufficient to accommodate their growth there. The setbacks, the height, the impervious surface maximum standards have all been met. Even if we consider those hoop houses, those greenhouses as pervious or impervious surfaces, it's still only at 2%. So we are far from the 25% max there. There's a natural buffer and a heavy tree line that surrounds the perimeter of the property. With also that large wooded area providing screening for the property, residential property at the rear, and then also the nearby properties. The detention pond and drainage ditch on the north end of the property has been approved by the Madison County Madison County Water and Soil District, and IDEM has issued that general permit that was required. The plant nursery and greenhouse is a conditional use in the rural residential district, which is one of the criteria that is before you tonight. We anticipate that this property will be well manicured, well maintained and cared for, and will meet all the developmental standards of the UDO.
Any chemical on the nature of the business, chemical usage, herbicides,
No, sir, it's all natural.
all natural?
Yeah, we don't.
Stormwater issues, retention ponds should be, feel comfortable with that.
Yes. It was over right at about an
Yeah.
acre of disturbance there, and they came in and between the Bucklews and their engineer, they addressed it right away, so.
And
yeah,
IDEM
very
is out.
responsive, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Mhm.
So we will, I will ask for a motion to approve or deny or approve with, or without conditions.
I'll make a motion to approve as outlined in this presentation.
I will second that motion.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 So that's all in favor. With
Ask for any opposed.
any opposed? No opposed.
Okay.
So we will approve as presented, so I don't have to repeat that. No additional conditions. And thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
If, you're more than welcome to stay, but you are also welcome to leave. We don't, we're not offended. We let people kind of go as they presented if they would like.
Good luck to you.
And I
Yeah,
explained to
good
him
luck.
that we'll follow up with the findings of facts here in the next 30 to 60 days and. we'll
Stop
get
by,
that
we'll
copy of
get
the-
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you, thank
I
you.
don't blame you. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, tell Kim
There,
thank
the
you as
sun while it's
well.
still up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Okay. So we can move on then to the next.
Thanks. Yes, so for our next petition, we have Sheila Curtis. She is the owner of Dogs and Suds. She is present here as well this evening. This property is 3104 West US Highway 36, and she occupies Suite 1 currently. This property is zoned general business, and it's a little bit over 2 acres for the entire parcel. Remember, about a year or two ago, this property consisted of 3 properties there, but then they had sold out, and it's just in the remaining 2 acres there that is owned by Sue Hughes, and Sue Hughes did provide the representation form for Sheila Curtis, to file this petition. All filing notices and requirements have been met, and again, no oppositions or feedback was received by the general public. This subject property consists of 1 shopping center with 7 units. The petitioner currently uses Suite 1, which is about 1,500 square feet. She utilizes it for pet grooming and daycare services, which is defined by the UDO as a public kennel, which requires a conditional use. This business has been in operation for 20 years, in which 75% of the revenue comes from grooming and daycare services, and about 25% of the remaining comes from overnight boarding. There is an adjoiner suite, Suite 2 to the east, in which soon will become vacant and available for lease. So that is the reason why Mrs. Curtis is here, and to seek a conditional use for her property. On the next page there. So petitioner is requesting a conditional use to do the following. So it's about 3-part here. So the first part, she is seeking to enhance and remodel the existing Suite 1 to remodel the grooming and daycare services in the public kennel space. The second part, she's asking to expand and construct a public kennel in the adjoiner Suite 2 to the east. So again, that public kennel use requires a conditional use to even expand. This conditional use, just because of not understanding, we have the planned business as well, was the zoning district years ago. That conditional use was not obtained for this business. So she is seeking that conditional use for the existing business as well as the expansion thereof. And then third, she's asking to connect that Suite 1 and Suite 2 opening of the shared wall between those 2 units to combine and have one cohesive business there within the shopping center. The applicant intends to hire TWC Incorporated. They are an experienced construction firm. They specialize in pet care facilities. They will be conducting the remodel and the construction on the site if this conditional use is approved. This firm is experienced in multi-tenant structures, which would be ideal for this building. And they're very familiar with those disturbances such as smell, sound, and waste control. That being said, here in the image below here, you'll see on the very far left, that is the existing outdoor pet play area that is currently already owned and operated by Mrs. Curtis. That will remain as the only outdoor area for the pets there. Suite 1 is where she exists and operates now, currently outlined in yellow, and then outlined to the right there in blue is Suite 2. You could see that it's even double the size of Suite 1. So at the end, she would be looking at about 4,500 square feet to be able to service in for grooming, daycare, as well as public kennel overnight boarding services. You want to go ahead and switch or change to the next page here is our analysis. That is all that we have on this petition, but yet again, we have Mrs. Curtis here that if you have any questions for her or myself, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I do have a question,
Mhm.
both of our planning staff here.
Yeah.
I don't believe Suite 2 in the last 20 years, and stretching my mind here, I don't think Suite 2 has ever had any restaurants, any food businesses, correct? Do we know, since this, is being proposed to move into Suite 2, if there's any kind of ordinance regarding pet grooming in a certain distance, or just because it's same building? I know there's a wall, but
No, there's nothing like that. If there were to be anything, it would be through the county health inspector. And if it was something that they would not approve, like the state design release of it, then it would be on them, but we don't have anything like that, that says you can't have, you know, this next to this use. It's just the uses themselves.
So I just, when looking at this, I would hate for someone to move forward if we approve. And then later on, a different entity that we weren't aware of comes in.
Yeah,
So that was my only,
sure.
like,
Yeah.
biggest thought there, just because there hasn't been that type of business occupied any.
Yeah,
Papa
there's-
John's right next door.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
that's
no,
what-
but they're
yeah.
currently divided by
Yeah.
whomever, over the years it's switched a lot, but Suite 2 has never been, from my recollection, while the dog grooming business had been there, a restaurant in between, so that separates, there's
Yeah.
a buffer, if you will. But then when it moves, I know there's a wall, but I didn't know if there's distances or anything,
If there were
Um,
present health hazards, again, that would be something that the county health inspector would deal with, but it's nothing within our purview to regulate that.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and also I would say maybe about 10 years ago, maybe, I would say within the last 10 years, there actually was a pet store in there. There was
I remember the
birds.
pet
They
store.
specialize with birds and so forth. So
Unlimited birds or something.
it was very exotic type birds.
Yeah.
I know parakeets and,
Okay.
parrot tracks. Okay. I do remember that. I don't recall what year it was, but
Sign was up for a while in my
Did
home,
it?
out there a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do remember it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I
And
just
we do,
wanted-
yes, no,
Yeah,
and it's a good
check
question, it's a great
everything
question. I know in general business, it is a conditional use allowance, and it doesn't have that restriction of any distance between, whether it's a restaurant or
Right.
place of worship or institutional or anything of that sort.
But I do think you raised a good question. I retired from field of public health, but it's been a long time ago now, but it might be, and I see it's not an issue for us as a town, but it might be advisable if this is approved to contact the health department, see if they have any issues with that. I don't know if you've talked to Papa John's or not, if they have any issues with that.
Well, they would have received a letter, correct?
No, it's only property owners, not tenants.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Might be good to talk with them if you're moving forward, just to make sure that you don't get some other issue beyond us that might have an impact on what you do.
I would imagine if there's going to be a large remodel, which it sounds like there is an opening of a wall, that would have to get a state design release, which is usually sent to Brett, and then he does like kind of the on-site inspections. I would imagine if there was something, the state engineer might comment or say, hey, we need to have a health inspector review this or something like that, is what I would guess.
I
Well-
just don't want to give anyone a false expectation and expend a lot of money
Yeah,
when we could have
yeah, but I do
checked
not
Yeah.
know
for
that.
things like that, okay.
Wouldn't think you would, but you don't want after the fact, you get it all done and ready to go, then the health department shows up and has an issue of some type.
Yeah,
It might be good just to touch base,
right.
what your plans are.
And with my conversations with Mrs. Curtis, her contractor is going to be installing a pretty thick barrier between Papa John's and that unit to control the sound, any smell or anything of that sort, that she had indicated there were certain
Says-
features and materials.
Almost just make it two separate. As much as possible,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Are you planning to mostly expand the dog grooming part or the kennel part or just a little of both?
We do, I like to term it more boutique type boarding now, so we do some, but, it's it's minimal. I think what is going to expand the most quickly would be the daycare, the play care. And then, I have recently added, 3 additional groomers, so we need more space for that also. But, primarily, more room for the dogs at play.
oh, but it's a one large
Mhm.
area back there.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have additional
Further.
questions? Rob, do you have any questions?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So I'll just have you go on with your list if you want.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
We as Phyllis staff, the business has been operation, successful for 20 years. The conditional use, would not be detrimental to public health and safety. We feel that she would keep up to those standards. Business owners, going to be looking at hiring TWC, which is a contractor that is fully experienced in this type of improvement, which would be able to properly control those sound and odor and waste nuisances that need to be taken into consideration. The improvements would be limited to the interior, also just to the existing footprint of the existing suite, as well as the additional suite there, suite number 2. There will be no external modifications or expansions to the site. The subject property does provide adequate public utilities to accommodate the expanded services that she is seeking. Clientele also will be mainly a drop-off pickup only. Won't be anticipated as far as any type of long stay. However, if there were to be, say, the grooming comes in and they stay for the duration of the grooming, there is a large parking lot that is adequate to be able to handle that growth in that business, as well as any long stay parking there. Currently, it's used by a kind of a party venue type thing, and they stay quite a bit of hours in duration, on a daily or an afternoon or evening stay, and it would not even come close to even meeting those parking needs for this business. And, public kennel is a conditional use within the general business as a requirement for this request, and we anticipate that all developmental standards will be met as this property does develop.
So since we did discuss a few, I'll say conditions, such as just when the plan design asked about, just that wall space and just checking with the health board as well, before any money, too much money gets poured into something and then we've helped mislead. I would think that would be good conditions just to make sure those things are checked.
Is that a condition or just Felix, a commitment from the petitioner?
Well, it certainly can't hurt to call it a condition. I think, sounds like petitioner would agree to that.
So then there'd be some kind of a verification.
Yeah.
That,
Specifically
It's-
what, the health department
yes.
situation? Okay.
Yes, because I would not want that to come back later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people change positions and
Mhm.
sometimes things are as clear as muddy water when reading ordinances and the interpretation. So to me, that's just a safety check for
Certainly.
our business owners in town.
How do you handle the animal waste?
Right now, of course, we have outside play yards, so we pick it up and everything's triple back. We usually use grocery store plastic bags for the first pickup. And, we put it in a diaper genie, like you would do with a baby. And then after that, we take the diaper genies and put them in, trash bags and put them in the dumpster. I've never had anyone complain about the odor. I think the trash right there is picked up twice a week. If it were a problem, I know that, super large kennels, sometimes they recommend they freeze it until trash day. So.
Well,
The contractors, they have, if we're at that volume, like they have it planned, like here, you're gonna have your waste disposal in here, like they have it very, planned out.
But right now it's triple five.
Okay, I guess the thing I wonder on that is, with the proximity with the Papa John's there, you're expanding your business, that's great. I think some of those concerns that Jenny has mentioned and myself as well, that touch base with the health department, make sure that would be probably an advisable thing to do.
Do you have a?
That's separate from us, but
we can
Yeah.
ask Brett.
Yeah, we can
they're
check into it.
they're going to know how this is handled because you mentioned Papa John's, they may or may not be aware of this expansion. And they may have some concerns, because right next door, shared wall with large food service facility. So, everybody's on the same page, know what's going on, and
Is the dumpster further out? Or are they shared or?
Right now it is provided and I share it with a couple of other tenants, but, we don't create large volumes of
Yeah.
trash. We have hair, I'll say hair, but I bag it also, so there's hair and, well, and I actually take my recycling boxes and. So, but yeah, there are 3 dumpsters back there.
Is it, they're, I'm trying, I should have driven, I tend to drive by everything before meetings. And I just can't, okay, they are
It's
back,
in the
so
back.
they're not near the building and they're pushed back, okay.
And I wanted to mention also, there is a back door back there, and we do have a playground back there, so, I mean, it's within the same fence, but there are 2 here.
It seems like it would be hard to put a condition on this,
Yeah, on
Not
that,
our
but,
issue, I
but they're
guess.
already talking.
because they're already committed to doing it, so.
Yeah,
Mhm. I
okay,
think where I'm coming from primarily that you spend a lot of money, get all this, and something comes up that's beyond what we do or don't do, that could have an impact.
Well, hopefully
You don't wanna
that's
get
what
blindsided.
my experienced contractor, I mean, he's called up, that's what they do, they specialize in kennels, and he said that he has built kennel, I call it kennel, but it, very small percent is in the kennel part, but he has put some next to actually sit down restaurants before. And other states, he works in other states, so we wanna make sure.
I mean, I used to work at a pet grooming salon.
Oh.
And we shared with a Noodles and Company, so. Granted, that was Ohio, but it was
Yeah,
never a problem.
we
We,
don't care.
we didn't triple bag anything, we were lazy.
Just
So,
touching base.
We're just
yeah.
looking
Yeah.
out.
Not a bad thing to do.
Yeah, you know, I just don't wanna ever make a decision and then. So, an owner puts all their, you know, heart and soul and money into something and then. We didn't think through everything, so.
Yeah.
That's why we nitpick a little.
No. good
Okay.
conversation, Yeah.
So I think those conditions, just when Brett reviews
Mhm.
with. Where does he have additional approval or does he just look at it with the engineer?
No, he has his own, building international code that he uses. but,
Okay.
When they submit to get a state design release, the engineer sent him a copy of the approval.
Okay, so that as a condition as well as just, touching base with the Department of Health, and I'd like that piece just documented, just so if people change positions, we're good with what was said
Yeah.
originally.
Okay.
So again, the board can deny this, approve or approve with conditions, so I will ask for a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the project as presented with the understanding that you will contact public health.
I'll second.
Okay. So if everyone is in approval, if we can say aye with those 2 specific conditions. Aye.
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 Was that an aye, Rob?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All-
So we
all
have,
Any opposed?
any
Can't say any
opposed?
Every time, I know it's
I
really
know,
annoying.
I don't run this one usually. Any opposed? Okay, no one's opposed, so we will approve this with the 2 conditions
Sure.
as mentioned.
Yeah, we'll have that in the findings of fact as well.
Okay,
Great.
thank you, and I will let you guys exit if you would like to as well, so you are not held here.
Good luck to you.
Congratulations.
We'll be in
Thank you.
touch. Okay, thank you.
My dog looks.
You guys are making great time.
Yeah.
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 Alright. All right, so our third and last petition. This petition was filed by Community Health Network, represented by Council Timothy Oakes. But for him, filling in for him this evening is Council Jason McNeil, as well as Assistant Jennifer Milliken. Sorry. I apologize about that. So they are both here if you have any questions, or also will like to invite them to make any additional comments or presentation as well. All the filing and notice requirements have been met. We've received all the documentation needed for this petition. And likewise, we've not received any remonstrance or any opposition to this petition or any feedback of any kind from the public. So this particular parcel is zoned institutional. If you recall, recently went last year in 2023 through a rezone change request. It was a heavy business, but then now it is zoned institutional. The property is a little bit over 10 acres, 10.3 acres. This property is vacant. And it's under a site development plan review for primary care and urgent care with x-ray services, which would be housed in a one-story structure. They're anticipating that structure to be approximately 25,000 square foot building. We also would like to mention that there is, and we did not know this at the time before this started developing, but there is a county stormwater management plan that calls for a large detention pond at the most western border of this property. So it's back in here. So when they worked with the county drainage board, it calls for a detention pond here along I-69 interstate here. Go ahead and flip to the next page. Petitioner is requesting a variance to do the following. They would like to locate more than 50% of the minimum amount of required parking in the front of the primary structure. So here sits the primary structure. Behind the primary structure is that large detention pond that is required with the pretty deep setback required by the state there from the interstate. But then this is where the primary structure sits. And then you'll see that there is, this isn't the best image here, but there is parking along the rear and the side. And then the majority of the parking would be up on the front. Specifically, they are asking for 94 proposed parking spaces. The requirement, according to the development that they're bringing in, the maximum in the front is 63 parking spaces, not including those handicapped or those accessible parking spaces. Here to the north, you'll see another structure here. That is future development only. That is unknown at this time. It's to be determined. It's just a conceptual plan here for that future development. But according to the chapter 3 of our UDO, it states that for the institutional zoning district, it is limited to no more than 50% of parking in the front. But they wish to seek this variance because of a few different reasons. They feel that would behoove not just their operations, but then the community as a whole. They are asking to designate that 75% in the front and then the 25 remaining percent on the side and the rear to provide enhanced patient access and safety, to provide close proximity to the main entrance for their patients that typically come with a health condition, to limit that walking distance for those patients. Also, they would like and feel it's best to separate the parking areas for staff and for the patients, to designate that front area just for patients only. Also, this variance would help increase the visibility and the aesthetics along I-69. It would remove that large parking lot in that rear, which would be visible from I-69. And then also to accommodate that large detention pond here at the rear of the property. This image here, again, sorry, it's not, it came out a little darker than I had hoped. This is a very heavy buffer for landscaping plan. They not only have the perimeter landscaping, they also have the pond detention landscaping around the detention pond here. They have several landscape islands in the parking lot, as well as there is a parking lot landscape perimeter. And then there also will be that minimum 3 foot either a berm or a hedge, to then provide landscaping here along the roadway Enterprise Drive. This is Enterprise Drive here. This roadway here is Hampton Drive. It's actually, it's a
just dedicated
drive that's
right-of-way.
dedicated
It's
right away, but
grass.
it's not existing yet. But it sits on the property to the north, but it is to be the designated ingress egress area for that property once that property develops, yeah. And then, of course, then we've got, the frontage there off of I-69. That is all we have except for our analysis and our comments that we would provide, but I would definitely invite Mr. McNeil if he would like to add any comments or you have any questions for himself or staff. More than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Question I have, Denise, on the, like the schematic is presented with the landscaping looks good, but if we approve this on the expansion to the front of the structure, and I get where you're coming from on that, but do we set a precedent for other businesses that as time goes on, that say, well, you approved that to the front, and now you don't want to approve this, my project to the front.
Yes.
Do we
Yes.
run into a element of risk, for lack of better words, on if we do approve that with the expansion to the front?
Yes, I think that's a very excellent point. I think that we would definitely need to keep in mind and make it very clear in a finding of fact, if this variance was to be approved, the reasons for why this property is unique. Whether it's because of the service that it's providing, medical needs for patients, that would be, in my mind, the key to this petition.
And the butting up to I-69
And-
and the unique parcel, I
Yes.
think we need to note
Yes,
that.
yes, and we have that in
And
our.
the need
report,
for the
yes.
pond, and most wouldn't necessarily have that
Yes.
need.
Yes, this property is, as you can see, it's kind of deep and narrow. And it is surrounded by not only right of way off of Hampton Drive, Enterprise Drive, as well as I-69, but then along the south border here is a drainage easement. There is also a natural bioswale that they have to preserve here along the road front, and also electric easement here. And then there's also drainage easement here as well. And then that requirement of that large detention pond to meet the drainage board's requirements for the county, to complete that stormwater management plan that they had designed years ago.
And I know when we had gone through the UDO, it was to break up the paving paradise,
Right, season parking,
and the aesthetics.
sure.
Which this is again a unique parcel with all of the factors that Denise just went through. And I don't think that visually that it'll affect future development beside, because we always have to think about the other parcels when we're making these variances. But from the looks of this,
So I think to your point, Bob, I mean, any variance or conditional use can set a precedent, but I think that it's really making sure those findings of fact are as precise and detailed as possible, because that gives you ammunition to not just have to carte blanche approve anybody that comes in. Another example we had of this parking not being feasible was Dave Craven's, correct, on the
Mhm,
Dollar
yes,
Tree.
yes.
A very odd parcel surrounded by stuff. There was nowhere else to
Very
go. It's
shallow.
along 67. So like when we incorporate those factors into findings of fact, I think it helps us to not have to really, set a precedent that says now it's just free game. Also with, to Jenny's point with our UDO, the landscaping requirements are starkly different and more improved from our old code. That one was from 1997. I can't really blame it. But these are worlds improved, as opposed to what we had, just 4 years ago. So.
and it will help with drainage too, all of that planting.
So it's always there, but
Yeah,
I think with,
well, the finding of facts you referred to.
yeah, I think that's kind of where we could each, and that's why, part of why this board is here is because it's a case by case unique basis for each petition that comes in.
I like the discussion and the presentation on the landscaping. You get into that 5 years down the road on the maintenance of landscaping on.
Mhm.
We may have that, or how does the town have, what protection do we have as far as 5 years, 10 years down the road?
So.
Landscaping is maintained.
Certainly. So on the site, on private property, what we have are nuisance and unsightly ordinances. If things get overgrown, if they get, unsafe as far as trees hanging out into the road, et cetera. That's the mechanism that we have. While each development is required to plant street trees, those are the only thing that we would maintain. In this case, their street trees are actually gonna be on their own property because of how many utilities run through the area. It's not really feasible, to put it in the grass lawn, which is more typical, and then we maintain it. So really, particularly with this site, there's not gonna be any maintenance that the town has to do. It's all gonna fall on private property owner and us upholding our nuisance ordinance.
Okay.
And then they also, we have the updated tree manual, so people aren't planting invasive
Yeah.
trees
Right.
that we're trying to
Good
get
point.
rid of.
Pine trees. Yeah.
The cheap builder, just have messed up.
Yeah, and they have hired Context. Context was who helped to develop the playground here at the town. And it's been very,
Yeah. In depth.
yes, very in
Landscaping,
depth. I mean,
yeah.
this is probably gonna be a property that we're all gonna be wanting to drive through at fall and
Well, I don't wanna
springtime
be
as
sick
these
driving
trees
through.
develop,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I can't wait once once it's
Yeah.
developed, just to see all the variety. They've actually, they've taken our recommendations on some of the larger trees in those landscaping areas. They downsized to a
Downsized,
smaller
yeah.
tree, and I mean, for a site that's only 10, 11 acres, there was a lot of different requirements that come out of our UDO. And to come out with just one variance need, I mean, they've really worked hard. Their engineers and all of their agents that they've worked with on this project have,
Absolutely.
yeah, on
And,
point.
and in between this retention pond and 69,
Mhm.
those are hedges.
They're gonna
trees.
be trees, there's gonna be shrubs.
Okay.
Yes, they're going to probably stick to a medium-sized tree or a large-sized tree, at mature height. There is some area here at the center where they've indicated that where their sign on the building to give some more visibility, they may go with
Sure.
a smaller tree, but it's not required as far as the height of a tree. Their options of their trees, are wonderful.
It still helps for noise filter,
Mhm.
since we have apartments. I know the apartments are right they're south of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when they widened 69, they took out a lot of the tree lining, and so you can hear more. So as we develop this, having more of that in is just a quality of life.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
I didn't see any reference to permeability or impermeability. Did that come into play at all?
They're right at 60%, which is
Yeah.
the maximum for the institutional.
I'm thinking with that new
Because-
conceptual
right.
development up there, that's a lot of parking area, a lot of asphalt.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
that the
and-
same parcel of land? So that would be
Mhm.
it is.
the same
yes,
owner? Okay.
Yes, so they would be capped at whatever impervious surface they have existing. This area here is completely pervious. That is that bioswale that runs in front of the property that would be left open. And then on the south property, as well as the entire, probably 1/8 of the property here on the rear for the detention pond. But yes, that would be something that we'll have to continue to check to make sure that that is not exceeded.
Which they've hit the max on that, but most parcels like this wouldn't necessarily have the retention pond, so that's kind of a factor on retaining
Right. Mhm.
that drain off
Mhm.
for future,
Mhm.
if the max.
Yeah, yeah. At this point, they do not know what type of development they anticipate, probably somewhat medically related, but whether it's going to be a nonprofit as community health or privately owned medical service. And I don't know if they've even given really a time frame. That might be a few years out.
Is there a
before that.
timeline for this project?
We are, at the last stages of site development review. We just have a few tiny, details to iron out. But we're looking to have a kickoff meeting for construction, like a pre-con meeting, probably the first or second week of April. So we're very close.
Pretty quick.
Do you guys have any more questions? Rob, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I don't see on this plan, it's a little tough to see on my iPad, any place that's dedicated to get an ambulance to a side door or a rear door for a patient that gets sent out by one of the physicians there. And I know from many years of past experience, if you have the ambulance come to the front, it really blocks up the public's access for the time the ambulance is in there. And it's not great for patient privacy. So I don't know if there was any thought to taking some of this side or rear parking and making a spot for an ambulance. That is something I would definitely like to see, a spot where an ambulance can back up to a side or a rear door and be able to get inside without going through the public lobby.
So would that be for tonight, or that is more?
Do you have
I
any
would-
feedback on the ambulance area?
No, we haven't been part of those conversations.
Okay.
So.
I mean, from my understanding of the services, they're anticipating about 150 trips, visits a day. I think it was with primary care, about 15 every hour, but then about 30 for the urgent care. Now, of course, any medical circumstance could always get elevated into the need for ambulance to come in. So I think it's a great point, but I think at this point, probably that front entrance was where they would probably anticipate if some ambulance did have to come in and take to a longer term medical facility. But that could be something that we can discuss under the site development
Yeah.
plan and
We
have
can-
some
Or
modifications
have different
made.
door, because there would be double wides that would open.
Yeah.
So then also just as, because there's sidewalks that people could walk up to the front, but might need their own entrance, not just
Is that-
entry door, I should say.
I think there's entry doors on all four sides.
Okay,
I believe, but I think some of them are staff only. So if that could possibly be where some of this parking is,
Establish
where an
some window.
ambulance could
Yeah.
come over and it would just be a double wide door instead with a ramp instead of a curb.
Yeah, I think Rob raises a good point, and I would echo that should be separate, because you're gonna have some medical emergencies. that Go through that, and you don't wanna be trucking somebody out the front door past 10 patients sitting there in the lobby. And, yeah, another entrance would be a good point to consider.
but that would go to, for the site plan review,
Mhm.
Correct.
correct,
Which would
and
be
not
looking at-
necessarily part of
Yes.
this variance.
Yeah. And yeah,
Okay.
we can definitely suggest that.
Do we need to make
To
that a
them,
condition?
we have,
I would think you would include that some kind of condition
Would you?
with that, yeah,
can they do that?
that's an important issue.
Sure can, if you want to, make it a condition.
You might have Rob, if he agrees with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it as a condition that they find an ambulance loading area that is separate from the public entrance. And I think that would give them the flexibility of, they're gonna have doors on every side for exiting anyway, to pick the one that's best. Probably just have to dedicate a couple of parking spots to it. It looks like they have way more parking than was required by our ordinances. I think that's a simple fix.
I agree, Rob. Okay, so we can make that
Other
as
conditions.
a condition.
I have the building
Yeah.
plans.
Do you have a comment or a question or?
I'm just
That's
thinking it
something.
through, I know communities, they have facilities like this, and they've obviously thought about these
Sure.
issues. I'm not certain they don't have a solution already baked into the current plan.
It's hard to tell from these
Yeah,
renderings, which,
I guess my preference would be that this be left as part of the site plan. development plan process where everyone's kind of working through these types of issues, whereas this is a kind of a narrow issue. Parking, I understand that, you know, the board wants it addressed, and I think it should be addressed somehow. I guess I'm not sure that putting a condition without us or you kind of understanding or knowing what the current plans are, or whether there are other reasons for doing it one way as opposed to the other.
So
I
this
don't.
does this come back to the plan? It does not, does it? It just comes
The
It's
plan
just with
commission.
us.
with you guys
That.
And
to see
I,
through that issue.
yeah, and I'm looking at the sort of building plan here. It's, looks like the entrance, there's no entrance on the north side. That's just grass. There's a employee entrance in the rear. And I think one on the south, but then the main one is on the east.
And this main one, which is,
Also, that might, and to your point, I would agree that if there might be something within the building plans where there is kind of a, I don't know what the.
a door beside your
Door
double
beside the
doors.
door.
Yes.
Where it's almost like going into triage or something, where it's
Yes.
back where the offices are, where if there were to be an emergency. That's where it could be addressed. But Rob, I can certainly ask, if that is addressed. But
So we're
I
just,
do not know.
the condition with you following up
Mhm.
with the flow of movement, basically.
Mhm. Yeah,
I would just like to avoid a situation where if it's already somehow addressed, that, I don't wanna have them be forced to redo their.
like pigeonhole it into a certain
Right.
schematic.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I agree, it's a good point. And I think it should be something that can be discussed and worked
At
out.
the site.
Yeah.
My concern is just thinking about the community buildings that are behind Community Anderson. Kind of the additional office buildings that have been built within the last few years. There's one that has an ambulance bay built into it. There's another one where we have to go right to the front under the main awning with the public. And my concern is if we don't put something in there as a condition, and the way they have planned to do it is by using the public entrance, then we are just going to allow that problem to continue. I want to make sure we have a little bit of teeth at least.
Yeah.
And I
sure,
believe that
understand.
if it was already planned for, it would be a moot resolved issue if it was a condition within this findings of fact. You know, I would think that, you know, by including it, if the board decided to have it as a condition, if they've already planned for such, it doesn't require modification. As long as they're committing to
He's out
a
the door.
separate bay for the ambulance loading area. That.
Okay, in a timely move here, I'm gonna have to leave and go on a fire run. So
Okay.
good luck.
So.
Thank you.
Case in
And-
point.
And I understand it. I do want to make sure that during the site review, it happens.
Can we make it a condition that it will be addressed within the site review? I mean,
Yeah, I think
In
that's fine. I just
whatever
don't-
way is
Yeah,
feasible.
exactly. I just don't wanna pigeonhole.
I
You know, I
understand
wanna
where you're,
give
That's never had
everybody
jurisdiction of it.
Right.
on the
it's not.
Middleton side and communities the chance to
Yes,
collaborate
Yeah.
on how to.
And the
address-
variance, typically, what's being asked isn't hindering on that, because the site review is something different than
Right.
this variance.
But I understand Rob's
I
point of
do
wanting
too.
something with teeth.
And that's
But-
up to you guys, that's your jobs to make sure
Mhm.
these details in the site
Yeah.
plan are thought through.
Mhm.
So you hear us.
Can you do that, require that? When you do the site review?
I can require that there's an ambulance, accessible area.
Other than the front.
Other than the front
Separate
door?
from the main entrance.
Yeah. Which could be, again,
Any of the other doors.
Separate
Yeah.
door.
a separate, just a separate door.
And they may have that already planned
Right,
out,
I
so
just, yeah, I
we-
don't know.
We just don't know.
Because
wanna speak
tonight
to it.
isn't necessarily
our
being
issue.
presented on.
That's the point.
So I then, you know, I can't tell everyone what to decide here, so we can either deny, approve, or approve with conditions. So I will put that out there for a vote.
I'd make a motion that we approve the project as presented with the caveat that the site review will address the ambulance, a separate ambulance entrance rather than the front door, front entrance, the public entrance.
So the caveat is just a no, it's not the condition, it's just
It's a
noting
caveat.
that making sure our plan staff review that. Do I have a second motion?
I'll second. I know Rob's going.
No,
second
it's
that.
just us three.
Yeah, they wrote. I mean, he's
So-
good with it.
Real quick, so you don't need a condition for that?
I don't really think we can, I don't
I
really
don't
think we can.
Because that's a part of the site is different than what's being presented for this particular variance and the issues that are.
Cause I feel like it
Part
would
of
be
this.
like, they want more than 50% parking up front. And they're gonna make a condition that the front of the building has to be purple, you know, like. I don't know if it's necessarily relevant. I do think it's a really important point, but I don't know if we can like technically get something, a condition on it and give it teeth.
Because during their site review, that's what their responsibility
Right.
and their expertise would make sure with this or anything.
And
that really gets
we can
presented.
coordinate with our fire chief and have him check, cause I think at one point we were looking at having some sort of secondary entrance for him that was just like a walking path or impervious surface pavers that are mostly hidden. They just look like grass so he can get in and get out without traffic. And that's something we'd probably look at with the building permit, cause you can do it a million different ways. So we
And I
can,
think
we can chat
Rob-
with him about all of that.
Clearly, he goes out on these, so he understands.
Right, he does.
The
Receive it every
flow
day.
of
They're-
things, and really, if you're thinking about little kids coming up, and an ambulance is up there and one shared door, and you have kids ramming through, and so it's just,
Spectators.
yeah, it's really valid points, but,
So
More-
just a couple things going on here, a lot going on, actually. You're not under any obligation to approve a site plan, so it certainly can come
That's
up
right.
then. On the other hand, a condition, any reasonable condition relating to parking, like you need a second entrance. You could make it a condition, it's not that you can't.
Okay.
So
And I was misunderstood.
that's a reasonable condition relating to parking, so it's not arbitrary, like, what kind of statue do you want out front or something that
Right,
doesn't relate to
the
parking.
purple building.
I mean, that whole area going around the building's a fire lane, right?
So you could make it a condition, you're not under an obligation to approve the site plan. There we go.
Okay, so we can scratch the word caveat and throw in condition
okay.
for the motion. That worked.
Does he
What
have to
is the
bring-
Okay, so can we
That-
resubmit that?
Under the site development
Yeah,
plan
make a motion
review,
that we
you'll
approve the
find,
project as presented with the commitment that you will have a second entrance for EMS.
Is there? I know earlier on one of the maps with the help, recommending that a condition that, they speak and work with the health department. I'm wondering if we could do something similar where, I'm just trying to, I don't wanna put either Pendleton or community in a box. Because I don't know all the potential solutions or the changes that would be necessary, the consequences of having a definitive condition that there be another entrance if there's not one already. I'm just wondering if we can do a condition that community in Pendleton work through this issue through the site plan process. That way there is flexibility on both sides, and as was noted earlier, they don't have to approve a site plan, so it can be something that's addressed, but it's with people that, community can give their input, and nobody can give their input, and everyone can work toward the solution.
Yeah, I think even Rob mentioned it's looking at a major change here. It's just the one set of double doors. You're gonna have people coming through and just a second door nearby. And we just don't have that in front of us to know where the doors are and what uses. So it sounds very
That's,
Like it's
I'm
a
right there
simple
with
work
you. It doesn't
through.
sound, I just don't know if it's a major change or not, so I don't wanna have to come back here if everyone sits down and says, wow, this really creates a bunch of issues.
But we are leaving it as the condition to our staff to work through this.
What
Yeah,
wording,
If that's
As
the
a
case, then that's
as-
fine, I
as-
just wanna make sure.
But not a shared, but just some other solution.
what wording would you use if you were us?
You know, as with the prior case, I mean, maybe just a requirement that this is an issue that's discussed and resolved between community and Hamilton as they're working through the site plan process, so.
I think that would make Rob happy.
I think so too.
So how about on condition that the site plan address separation of emergency services? That doesn't even require a separate entrance, it's just separation of emergency services. So it could
Different
be-
ways they could do that.
Sure, they could have
Mhm.
same door, but much, much bigger or something. But it doesn't even require a separate door, but separation of emergency services. So the condition is site plan addresses separation of emergency services.
And that gives leeway
Yeah.
for then our staff to work through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Denise?
Yeah, do we want to put, site plan address the separation of emergency services from the main public entrance? We want that clarification, or are
I
we,
think it would
just
just
wanna
be
keep
the,
it
the
just
typical
general?
day-to-day services.
And then
In case.
during the site review, and you guys have authority if you don't like what's presented to not approve.
Right.
And that's always been in your purview. So.
Yeah.
And with any building.
Correct.
Just to be clear, I'm sorry, Mr. But
Oh, no.
Where the condition would be, as you stated, would specify the front, separating from the front.
do things?
I didn't even use the word entrances. I just
Yeah.
said separation of emergency
Emergency.
services because, well, for one thing, it may just be an exit, but also it could be the same door.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think we're.
Separated by
what the issue is.
20 feet of
Yeah,
glass.
Yeah, so I think I would want, if I'm advocating for the community, just the flexibility that everyone can sit down. I think everyone realizes what the issue is.
Mhm.
And I just want to leave flexibility for them to work.
And there, it sounds like as worded, there's flexibility all the way to inflexibility if the staff doesn't come to a resolve, right? As
Yeah, there you
normal,
go.
not just this
Yeah.
situation, but in
Yeah.
all site plan
Deemed
reviews.
appropriate.
So do we have that noted?
So
And-
I'm a little, still concerned, and he probably, I wish Rob was here as well, but I'm retired from fire EMS, and Scott was there a long time as well. But the importance of, sometimes you have a person say they're having a cardiovascular event, they're there to see the doctor, and the person's having a heart attack, and things are going south, ambulance will come rushing in there, and sometimes when they're, it's just not always the most pleasant thing when you're taking the patient out. Sometimes things are really going south. And I think the importance of having a way for the facility to have that separate from where you've got 10 people in the waiting room, possibly being in the way, or they're thinking, oh, look at that. I would think they'd want something separate from that, just in these things happen. And, some kind of, I'd like to see some verbiage in there that we want that within the site plan. Whether we approve it on what we do, but you as staff that you provided
Yeah,
a mechanism for that. Different ways it can be done.
I'm looking at the rear of the building and I don't recall off the top of my head exactly how the interior of the building is laid out.
Which one's the rear? Is that the west side?
The west.
The west
yeah.
side.
And it looks, there's a pretty big exit area back there, cause it's like a staff outdoor area, I believe. And to me, if there's plenty of, there's not parking directly behind it. To me, that would be an adequate loading, unloading zone for an emergency as such.
I mean, it has to
It's
be
just-
kept clear because it's a fire lane. The whole road around it is a fire lane.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be striped that way. There's plenty of room to do that.
Mhm.
From what I'm looking at here, I don't have a scale with me, but, it looks to me like that would probably be, and it might already be planned to be
It may well be.
that exit, because it is a pretty big rear exit. But I don't have the building plan in front of me, but to me, just looking at it, that's probably where that would end up.
I think I look at it, don't really care, for lack of better words, where it is, other than something separate from where the public
Yeah.
is sitting in the.
I'm just saying, as far as layout, not having to change in a really dramatic way, it already kind of looks like the rear of the building is set up to.
And that's my hope.
Yeah.
What I think, I'm
Right.
just.
I don't know, I can't recall.
And not
Where
just,
the hallways are.
it's also the people walking in, you know,
Yeah,
you've got
so the rear, I
mamas
believe,
and
is
sick
just.
kids
is the
and they're
staff
running
only.
in and it just keeping things safe, the flow of things safe, because I have a feeling this is going to be heavily used
Okay.
from day one.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So how do we word it to keep from making the counselors nervous?
Well, I think we worded it in kind of using that open.
I think Mr. Jones
language.
was hitting on it, that
Yeah.
that's why I was not limiting it to an entrance. The whole emergency services needs to be
Just
separate.
separate.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that's why I'm like pointing out, it's not just the entrance, it's waiting room. And so, yeah,
And to be
on
worked
the
through.
condition that the site plan adequately address separation of emergency services, not just the door.
Do you have that, Stephanie?
I've got it written down. We got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And since you guys already approved, and then now with conditions, are you good with the condition that we've come to?
I am in my motion.
Okay, in the
I'll follow that.
motion, and then we have a second?
You ready to say it again, or was that in the first one?
We have it documented.
Okay, I'll
This
second that.
separation.
All right.
Okay, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's the three for our quorum, and we do appreciate Rob's input on one.
All
Yeah.
opposed.
All opposed?
Thank
Hold
you.
on, my,
Stickler.
So, yeah.
Okay. So we have an approval.
Excellent. Okay, we will make sure we
Good-
address
good
that.
project.
Thanks.
Thank you
Alright.
very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I'll make a
Thank
motion.
you.
Adjourn the meeting.
Let's see here, do we have, okay, so do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, meeting's
No.
adjourned.
I'll second.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.